And good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Art to Market broadcast with me, Jason Horsch, owner of Xanadu Gallery and publisher of Red Dot Blog.
And hi there, I'm Barney Davey, publisher of art print issues and numerous books on the art marketing field. And pleasure to be here once again with you, Jason, tonight. Another
Pleasure to
lousy
be
day
here
in
with you,
Arizona,
Barney.
right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and you'll notice we've got finally a name for our broadcast, Art to Market. We thought that fit pretty well, and it's Art 2, the number 2, right? Because there are two of us, right, Barney?
Exactly.
So, our goal, we've been doing this now, what, for 3 or 4 years?
Over 3 years, I think.
Over 3 years, monthly broadcasts, and we finally come up with a name, so yay. But it's a pleasure to have everyone here tonight, and we're going to be talking about marketing art on Facebook, and I know this is a topic of a lot of interest. I see a lot of conversation around this question of the viability of marketing on Facebook, and then once you get beyond the viability, okay, what's the process for marketing? So I'm excited to get into this conversation. Barney and I have both spent time working in Facebook extensively. We have extensive networks among artists on Facebook. And so it's going to be interesting to talk about the dynamics of marketing your art on Facebook and how you can use Facebook and leverage the power that is Facebook to expand your market and hopefully increase your bottom line as an artist. So, Barney, we got, I think, a lot to talk about here, and I guess we should decide where to begin.
Well, let's just talk a minute about, is it even a viable prospect for someone, an artist, to advertise on Facebook? Because it wasn't always, in my opinion. There was a time where I thought social media was okay, that you couldn't avoid it, but it was hard to get a payback from it. It was hard to measure what you were getting from it. It was almost like a feel-good kind of thing or a defensive posture kind of thing. But I have to say the way Facebook has responded to the fact they weren't making any money for so many years, they've really changed their business model around and made a lot of people who were using it organically unhappy because your news feeds aren't as robust as they once were. But on the plus side, they've made the advertising probably the most attractive kind of advertising for small businesses and niche marketers like, say, visual artists or any number of other businesses to dial into a certain target audience locally and exclusively. So.
And just maybe anecdotally, I have, and as do you, Barney, I'm sure many conversation with artists who are either dipping their toes into the Facebook waters or have been doing it for several years now. And I do hear quite frequently, and in fact, in the lead up to this broadcast, I had a number of artists who either emailed me or commented on the blog to say, I'm not selling necessarily a ton on Facebook, but I have definitely sold art on Facebook. I have followers on Facebook who are collectors, not just family and friends or other artists. And so the question of viability, I think, has been settled. Can you sell artwork on Facebook? Yes. How easy is it, and what's the process for getting there? I think those are the kind of the big questions that remain to be answered.
I agree. For the most part, I would say yes, some artists are making money on Facebook, and it's possible that you can sell direct on Facebook, but I think you're setting yourself up for disappointment if that's the tactic that you're going to take with Facebook. And I believe that goes not only for Facebook, but almost all other marketers. It's you have to get to know somebody first. I espouse this all the time, that if you want to build a base of collectors, the only way you can do that is get people to know you. And the people buy from people they like and from people they know. And Facebook gives you that opportunity to jump across that digital chasm and actually get to know somebody in a way that you wouldn't have that opportunity in any other way. So I'm excited about the prospects for Facebook, but I don't want to give anybody the impression they can just start, put a gallery on Facebook or just start putting pictures of art with a price tag on it and expect it to jump off the pages. Hallelujah if that can happen, but I wouldn't put money on it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that Facebook is a very powerful tool for use in building relationships with your potential collectors. And I suspect that there are going to be some artists who just kind of have a natural inclination and a gift for kind of cultivating those relationships that's going to translate very well to Facebook. Facebook is going to feel intuitive and natural in cultivating that relationship. And then there are going to be some artists who, and this is neither good nor bad, but just that doesn't feel as natural, and Facebook feels forced, and I think that those artists are probably better served by putting their efforts elsewhere, because Facebook, just like blogging or your website, it is going to require a sustained and prolonged effort on your part, and success, as it comes, is going to come fairly slowly and deliberately, and so if you're not ready to make a kind of a long-term commitment and put some real consistent effort behind it, I feel like you're probably going to be spinning your wheels a little bit and feel discouraged with what's happening on Facebook.
No question about it, but really what we're talking about is networking. You're just using a digital tool or a social media platform in order to make connections with people. So whether you were going out and trying to just work your warm market, the people that you know and the people that they know, or whether you're trying to meet people on Facebook or any other social media for that matter, you only get out of it what you invest into it. It's not a one-way thing. And all the advertising does, you can be on Facebook and make a bunch of friends. I, a few years ago in a blog post, created a coined a word called Struff Rangers. I matched together strangers and friends because I've mentioned that I have roughly 3,000 friends on Facebook, and I don't know most of them. I wouldn't know them if they were sitting right in front of me. They've asked me to be their friend, and most of them are artists, and I'm happy to be their friend, but I don't have time to get to know 3,000 people on Facebook or in life. For instance, in my real life, they say the average person knows about 150 people, and that's probably true on digital or some kind of social media. But the point of Striff Rangers was I would rather have 10 people that I know that are true friends, that I know something about, and they know something about me, and we've developed some kind of ongoing relationship, versus 100 or 1,000 Struff Rangers who virtually know nothing about me or very little. It would be hard to get them to jump in and want to buy something from me, for instance, as a Struff Ranger. And I think just bring this back to advertising, which is what we came here to talk about today, what it does is help you get to the people who are most likely to be that person that you can take to the next step, engage in some way, and become known to them. And it can be across the board. You were talking about there are some artists who are going to be more tuned into this than others, and that's kind of probably the same. We all don't have the same skill sets, but one way or another you can use Facebook, I believe, to get to know people and have them get to know you. You have to spend time with it, and ultimately that'll foster a relationship and allow you to turn that person into a collector. A collector is being somebody who's more likely to buy multiple pieces from you over the course of the years than someone who's a buyer, who I consider a person who likes your art but is buying it for a specific need at the moment without the intention of something long-term with you.
So we've kind of looked at kind of bigger picture and from a little bit of an elevation of, okay, what is Facebook viable? Is it something that you should be considering? And I think Barney and I are both saying yes, it is something considered. Let's let's get into some strategy then and talk about how you might approach Facebook and give you some specifics. And I'm going to tell you that from my end, from my perspective, and looking at it from what we've been doing in the gallery, we have begun doing some advertising on Facebook in an effort to do exactly what we're talking about today, build relationships with our collectors, and begin selling art. But I feel like we're very much in the beginning stages of this. Now, that being said, I have put a lot of effort and a lot of study into understanding Facebook, and I have spent some time in some sessions with a representative from Facebook who's been giving me pointers on how we might approach the whole advertising on Facebook question. So I don't feel like I'm coming at this completely blind, but at the same time, in a sense, I think we're going to need a follow-up broadcast, at least for what we're doing, a year from now, when I can look back and say, okay, here's what we've done over the last year, and in terms of trying to generate sales on Facebook, and here are the results. And so tonight, I think I'm going to be talking a little bit more about what our plans are and what our approach is going to be to advertising on Facebook. In addition to what we've already done, and as I mentioned, Barney, you and I have both been doing advertising on Facebook for a while, but we're just kind of working towards ramping that up.
Right. It's a lot to get your arms around at one time. It's a complex program, and you can. Perry Marshall's the foremost guru on AdWords, and I think he coined the phrase, if not he's the one who's popularized it, of the Google stupidity tax, which he uses to encourage you to buy his services or at least buy his book so that you learn how to use Google AdWords without just throwing money at them. And I think you can have a Facebook stupidity tax too. If you don't have a solid plan and then go through what's available on Facebook and how to use it to really refine what you're doing so that you can meet your goals, then you can be leaking money left and right. And fortunately with Facebook, you can spend small amounts of money and get some results, and it helps you kind of inform you as you go along. So it isn't. I think AdWords is easier to lose a lot of money fast than on Facebook. But nonetheless, if you don't study and take the time to learn how Facebook works and the nuances of it, it will cost you money. Everything you do costs you money to learn one way or another, but if you take it slow and invest the time like you're talking about, Jason, and I've been doing the same thing. I could see that this could do. There are a lot of things I'd like to be more aggressive with it, but I'm not really quite at the point where I'm willing to, put in a huge amount of money, because I don't feel like I've dialed it in exactly the way I want it to be. I don't feel like I'm too far away from that, but I think artists are in the same position. You need to learn what you're doing first. Spend the time with it.
So maybe we should kind of start a little bit at the beginning, and I think a question that a lot of potential Facebook advertisers would have, and I think a lot of artists should ask themselves this question, and I think you and I are going to come down on the opposite sides of this a little bit, not that we would argue about it, but just that we're approaching it a little bit differently, and that is the question of my personal Facebook profile versus a Facebook page. And Barney, I think you're using a personal profile, aren't you, to interact with your followers on Facebook?
No.
You are.
Well, let me back up and say, my 3,000 friends are on with my personal profile. Those people met me through my personal profile because I didn't even have a page for a long time, and then even after I had a page, it sat there because I didn't know what to do with it. And I just felt like I needed to put the page up. In fact, I have 2 pages now. One for art print issues and another one for Barney, Davey Art and Marketing Services. So I'm an example of kind of what not to do.
We're all examples of that with Facebook at some point.
I don't believe I need 2 pages. I'm probably going to just jettison one and and stick with the other. But I feel like my business page, even though I think I have almost 700 likes on Barney Davey Art Marketing Services, and that's the one I will stick with. I wish I'd started using that more exclusively a long time ago instead of the personal page, but it didn't work out that way. So right now, it's hard to use the personal page for personal reasons because I have such a wide, number of friends on it. You'll be fine one way or another. It won't be the end of the world if you end up like me, if you jump from a personal page to a business page. Or I think I like your model better, Jason. I think you thought it through a little better than I did, and you kind of keep your personal page to a circle of people that are really in your life, more or less.
Yeah, well, kind of. I mean, definitely yes to that point. And I just kind of, also stumbled into my approach to kind of the Facebook strategy as far as personal versus page. When I first started, I was doing exactly the same thing. I had my personal profile, and I just started talking to collectors and artists through this personal profile. And gaining friends, and I was starting to build up a good group of friends. And then I got an email from Facebook saying, hey, it looks like you might be using your personal profile to conduct business, et cetera, and you can do that, but we recommend you switch over to a page instead. And so I actually didn't start a new page. I just converted that profile over to a business page, and it brought all of my, quote, friends with me, which meant that a lot of my, my Aunt Bertha and my cousins suddenly were a part of that business profile.
Right.
And then I started a second personal profile, which you're right, I've just kept very limited. In fact, I think my circle of friends personally on Facebook is like 30 people or something like that. And I'm not very active there. It's mostly a way for me to keep in touch with family, etc. And then it's my business profile page that I'm much more active on. And I think that might be a good thing for you as an artist to think about as you're approaching this question of, do I set up a business page versus just using my personal profile? And I think that a good place to begin on that is that if you are very active in posting personal kind of, here's my kids, here's a family vacation, and you're really using Facebook pretty heavily that way, I would highly recommend then at that point dividing out and having a business page and your personal profile and trying to keep the two of them separate. Now, that's not to say that you're not occasionally going to go ahead and post some personal things on your business page if you see some overlap there. But I think you want to be a little bit careful about getting too personal on that when you're interacting with your business relations. You don't want to, certainly don't want to overwhelm them with personal posts, and I think that can lead to a high, high loss rate of friends if they came to you because you're an artist and they're interested in your art and they're getting too much personal information from you. So I think it just allows you to kind of divide out and send the right message to the right people. Your friends and family members get the personal stuff, and your business relations get the business stuff.
Facebook, as they will and as they will continue to do, I'm sure, makes changes to how they do things. One thing was they stopped you from your newsfeed. They throttled it down to where only 17% or something of your friends, depending on the size of your friend base, were actually going to see things that you put into a post that you made. And in the personal pages, not that long ago, they used to allow you to boost that by paying $5 or $6, and it would at least get it out in front of everybody that was on your friend list. And then they stopped that. One day they just took that feature away from the personal page, and it was at that point I used to use that when I would publish something that, like a blog post that I would like to get as much exposure for as possible. I didn't mind spending $5 or $6 to get it pushed out a little further. I understand Facebook is in the business. It's a for-profit business, just like I am, and I'm okay. You want to? It didn't seem like an outrageous amount of money to get the feed pushed out, and I understand why they throttled it back. It wasn't just all purely monetary. It was just managing data for them and for people, for their users. But anyway, they stopped that, and so that was when I started getting more active with my business page, because at least I can boost my business page and spend a little money on it if I want to make sure that more people than, you know, say a handful, 50, or maybe if I'm really lucky and get some shares, 100 people might see a blog post that I put on my business page, or on my personal page for that matter, if I don't boost it. And that's something I'm struggling with a little bit right now. I put the post, if I have a blog post and I think it's important, I'll put it on both of my business pages and on my personal page, and in some ways I feel kind of like I'm spamming people, but on the other hand, I know so few people out of the overall network that I have actually get to see anything. I kind of err on the side of, well, I'll spam a little bit, and if you see it in a couple of places, don't hate on me too much for it.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about, Barney, leads to some really important principles about Facebook that we should discuss a little bit. This concept, and I've seen several people in the questions before the seminar or before the conversation tonight ask about this. Is, you know, we've kind of all heard about Facebook is making it harder for you to get your content into people's news feeds, and there's a little bit of an uproar about this, and you know, as you mentioned, it's been a while since they started doing that, but they're constantly changing it, and especially among small businesses and artists and galleries, I think this would be the case. There's this sense that, hey, wait a minute, I've built this network of friends, and I want to be able to talk to them. I want to be able to put out a message, and I want them to see it and interact with it, and there's some, you know, some people are upset that there's less of this organic spreading of content than there used to be. I mean, significantly less. I kind of think that this is a lot of uproar that's a little bit misdirected and misplaced, because I think what Facebook is doing actually makes a lot of sense, both for the users and for the advertisers. If you step back and think about what Facebook is trying to accomplish, their goal, yes, as you mentioned, Barney, is obviously to generate revenue for their business, but they're not doing it in some kind of evil way where they're trying to make you pay for everything that happens on Facebook. They're saying the best way that we can generate revenue is by creating a high-quality experience for everyone who's on Facebook. And, you know, if I as a user am on Facebook and I go into my news feed and I'm just seeing message after message after message from small businesses, some of which I obviously am going to care about, but you get too many of those and you start getting overwhelmed, I'm probably not going to be spending as much time on Facebook. You know, I'm probably going to step away from it, and that's not going to be good for anyone involved. And so they've taken this approach now where they're trying to decrease the amount of noise that's coming through on Facebook and give, you know, in some ways give everybody a shot at getting more quality attention rather than the quantity of attention. And so, you know, I think they're still playing to try and get the balance right. But the nice thing about advertising on Facebook, and we're going to talk about a lot of the other things that are great about advertising on Facebook, but the nice thing is that if you put an advertisement out there, if I put out an ad for a piece of artwork, and I'm willing to spend to have that display ad go out to people in their news feeds, just because I'm willing to spend it doesn't mean it's necessarily going to show up, and that ad is going to go out, and if people start liking it and clicking on it and interacting with it, it's going to go out to more people. If they don't, you know, if my ad is no good or if it's not reaching the right people, the advertisement just won't spend my budget and won't be seen by anyone. And so I think it's actually a brilliant approach to kind of let the market to a certain extent, drive what content is being pushed out there. And if you are an artist and you've got something that's of interest to your followers, and you're willing to put, as Barney mentioned, just a little bit of an investment into getting it out there, and you can do it for a pretty small amount, a few dollars a day, you can start to see some results. I believe that Facebook can be a very powerful tool for generating those interactions.
It kind of lined up on Google's AdWords putt, if you will.
Absolutely.
You can, on Google AdWords, for those of you who don't know, the top position, those are the ads on the top of the Google, on the top of the search results. There's one or two, maybe three, I don't know if they've changed it or not. But at least the top two results are paid ads, and then all the ads on the links on the sidebar are paid ads. And it isn't always the person who pays the most that gets the top position. It's a combination of your willingness to pay a certain amount, a competitive amount for whatever the term is, and be grateful that you're not a DUI lawyer. They pay between $5 and $10 a click. Of course, they're expecting to get $10,000 to get you out of jail if you've been arrested, so that's why it's competitive. But anyway, it's not necessarily the person who pays the most. It's what Jason was talking about. Google, it does the same thing. They look at the whole experience because they want the best experience for the end user. That's what Google's about, and that's what Facebook is about with this. So they're looking, if you click on it and you go somewhere else and you spend some time there, or whatever measures they have to determine whether or not this is a quality ad, they can push you up in your position, and actually you can be paying less than somebody, even though you have a better and that you have a better placement on the sidebar at the top of the ad, just because you're doing things right. You're giving the user the best possible experience, and Facebook and Google and now Facebook will reward you for that. They'll punish you too. Your ad doesn't make any sense compared to what you're trying to drive traffic for. They'll just shut it off. They won't take your money, but you won't go anywhere with it.
And so, if you kind of look at that picture and can get over the point of saying, okay, Facebook isn't going to be free anymore, I'm not going to get that opportunity so much, then maybe the next question is, okay, what is my strategy then for getting people or the people who are following me on Facebook, or getting more people to follow me on Facebook? What's the overall strategy for being successful on Facebook? And as we alluded to a little bit earlier on, and what we're going to be doing through Xanadu Gallery's page is that we're really working not to just throw ads up and, hey, here's a $3,000 sculpture, please buy it. But instead, we've been preparing a kind of a campaign of helpful information for collectors. So we'll be sharing a guide on how to hang a piece of artwork, another guide on lighting, another guide on how to shop for artwork and what to look for, a guide on negotiation as you're making purchases. And our idea is, as we put those out, we're hoping that we're providing something that is useful enough that then a potential buyer is going to follow our page on Facebook in the hope of getting additional helpful information. And then over time, and I'll tell you, ultimately, our goal is to get those people onto our mailing list, and that's kind of been my big push in anything that we've done on Facebook. Is my goal is to get you into my mailing list, because as much as I like putting a message out and having you interact with it on Facebook, I know that I'm going to be one of a stream of different things that you're seeing, and if I can get you into my mailing list, I can hopefully get a little bit better attention. And obviously, we'll hit on both fronts, but that has been our strategy so far, and like I say, we're just in the beginning phases of that, and so we'll let you know how that works as far as converting those followers then ultimately into purchasers.
I think your experience, because you're on both sides of the equation to some extent, you have an audience of artists like I do, but you also have an audience of retailers like artists do. So you're getting to look at it from both sides of the equation, whereas I'm looking at it just from for my own personal use as a business. How do I reach artists, and what's that look like, and what do I do to make that work for me? But I think the information that you're gleaning from Facebook about how to do it from a gallery's point of view is going to be informative and instructive for artists in more ways than I will be able to provide, just because I'm not really working in that space. So in a year from now, or whenever we reconvene on this topic again, I think anybody who's listening now ought to be very keen to want to hear what you have to say next time, because you're going to just be that much smarter and that much sharper in terms of how you make Facebook truly work for you. That said, the higher level concept is still the same. What you described there with the guides is really just a method of developing a relationship, some authority, and a sense of trust between you and a potential buyer at Xanadu Gallery. I'm trying to do the same thing with the posts that I put out for artists. I'm going to give you useful information that will make you think that I can help you, and that if some of you want to take it further, that you might want to buy one of my books or take one of my workshops.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's the same kind of principles are applying, and really apply for anyone who's trying to market and sell on Facebook.
Do you want to talk about nuts and bolts?
Yeah, let's spend a few minutes talking about some nuts and bolts, and we want to leave some time at the end for your comments and questions. But I think that, I think we probably don't want to get too deep into the nuts and bolts, because we could spend weeks doing that. What we want to do is more make you aware of some general concepts and some thoughts about approaching Facebook. And maybe whet your appetite enough that you then go and start spending some time on your own. And not only are there some great guides out on the internet who will give you some good information on how to approach Facebook, but Facebook itself has a pretty extensive kind of documentation session that gives you some guidance through the advertising process. As you might expect, since that is how they make their revenue, they want to give you good information, and they want to make you a happy customer. And so I've found that the information on Facebook's advertising guides is incredibly helpful. And they have maybe a little bit more authority than some of the outsiders, just because they know what's going on under the hood, and so they can give you the best guidance to get there. And I think the first thing that maybe people should be aware of, and maybe a lot of you have not done this, is if you go into Facebook and look over on your, you
gotta go to the home page.
Yeah, you go to the home page of Facebook, and maybe in fact I should just pull this up, but what you're looking for is the Ads Manager. And I'm not sure, Barney, does Ads Manager...
just go to facebook.com/ads.
Okay, and I don't know the answer to this. Can you get access to the Ads Manager from a personal profile?
Sure.
You can get access to it, but can you do large-scale advertising using your personal Facebook profile?
I don't know the answer to that. I would think yes, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah, so there's a question you can answer. Obviously, we're doing most of our advertising from our profiles, from our profile pages. But either way, you'll start to get your feet wet by diving into the Ads Manager. And what you're going to see when you're in the Ads Manager is that you've got a number of different approaches that you can take towards advertising. First, you could just create an ad and just hop in and pick a picture, a photo to go with your ad, and start creating some content, text, and create a link that you want to go to. Maybe it's a page on your website or whatever. But I think if you're doing that, you're putting the cart before the horse. What you really need to be thinking about first is, okay, who am I trying to hit with this ad? Who am I trying to target, and who's the audience that's going to be most likely to respond positively to this? And if you've already got followers on Facebook, Maybe you've been friending your collectors or people at shows and that kind of thing. That's going to be an obvious first place to start potentially pushing out your message. But as we mentioned earlier, if ultimately the concept is I want to get new people who are not currently aware of me to start following me and to be able to start interacting with them, then you've got to think a little bit beyond that box of just who your followers and friends are. And this is where Facebook is so incredibly powerful, is that with every interaction that you have on Facebook, everything that you like, every bit of your profile information, all of that becomes targeting vectors for advertisers to approach you. And I think that sounds scary to a lot of people. Oh my gosh, I'm giving so much information. But again, I think it's pretty brilliant. It means that I'm not going to be seeing ads for stuff that I don't care about on Facebook. I'm only going to be seeing ads that are relevant to me. And as an advertiser, it gives you an opportunity to really target down and delve in pretty deeply to target your audience.
They give you some controls too with Facebook. If I get an ad from something that I find objectionable or just boring, or there's a little link up on the top right with a down arrow that you can say hide this ad, and it'll give you some reasons to tell Facebook why you don't want to see it anymore if you choose. So you can actually opt out of somebody's ad, and that'll let them know, let's not show them any more ads about whatever it is that you were unhappy with, whether it's weight loss or buying a new car. Hopefully it's not anything that Jason put out there or I put out there. Well, I can say this, one of the things that makes it easy on a page versus a personal page, on a business page versus a personal page, is on the business page, they just give you a button right on the business page that says Boost Page, and you can click on that, and they will use that particular post, or pardon me, Boost Post, not Boost Page. It'll allow you to just boost that particular post and create an ad using that post instead of having to go in and build an ad. So that makes it convenient, and if you're already getting a good feedback from the post, then that would be a good one to probably boost, because that means more people that would like to see it, and the likelihood that some of those who see it will share it will happen, and you'll get organic reach as well as paid reach from it. I've been experiencing that myself with recent posts that I put out. I had I paid $20 on my most recent post. I put out a post this weekend on how to sell art at shows. Basically, it was on my Barney Davey or Facebook.com/careering, which is my art marketing page. And on that one, I spent $20, and normally I would expect to get 50 to 70, maybe 100 people would get exposure if I just put it in there organically. But by boosting it for $20 and selecting an audience of people who I think are most likely to want to see that, and not just running it out to 2 billion, however many people are on Facebook. For $20, on that particular one, I reached almost 7,000 people, and of those 7,000, 2,200 came on shares. The people clicked on and shared the post because it was something that other artists thought, well, there's some good information here. I want other artists that I know to learn about this as well. So almost a third, not quite, of the people who reached were shared by other people who possibly saw it for being paid. Well, I don't think you can, for $20, and your experience may differ. You might get 2,000, you might get 4,000. Yeah, I can't guarantee what you'll get by any means, but for $20 to reach 7,000 people that are potentially buyers, and I got a bunch of likes out of that, page likes out of that. I'm not really trying to get page likes, but I got page likes and post likes as a benefit from it, and I just don't think where else can you spend $20? You can't call up your local radio station, TV station, or newspaper and say, hey, I got $20. You can't even buy a classified ad for $20 somewhere. And then yet on Facebook, you can dial in and say, I want to reach this type of audience with these, this age group, and even down to say I want to reach all the people that match this criteria in Phoenix, not greater than 50 miles. There's all kinds of things you can do with it, but I don't think there's any possible way that you could spend $20 and get the same bang for your buck as Facebook gives you for doing something like that. And I wasn't trying to sell anything. I was just trying to do what they call post engagement. I just wanted more people to become aware of that post, and what I hope that does over time for me is build authority for me as somebody who is helpful and has useful information with regard to art marketing and art business, and in a larger scheme of things that will come back to me in some other way. So I wouldn't spend more than $20. I could have easily spent 5 or 10 and still gotten a good bang for my buck, if you will, again.
And I'm just going to quickly show what the Ads Manager looks like, because some of you may not have been in there before. And it's pretty easy. You choose an objective for your campaign. Just for the example's sake, I've got our home page that I'm trying to direct you there. And I'm not going to dive into all of this, but I think what it's important to realize is that you really do have some very fine, granular control over who you're targeting. We've both kind of alluded to this, that you can be thinking about targeting your existing audience, but I think where Facebook becomes very powerful is reaching out beyond that. And so it's going to become very important for you to deliberate a little bit about who your audience is and how you can best define them, because the more accurate your understanding of your audience is, the better you're going to be able to get your message in front of them. And so, I mean, right away, one of the first things that you're going to be asked is for location, and obviously, it's not going to do you any good to have your ad feeding to people in Zimbabwe if Zimbabweans are not your primary target market. So you want to think about, okay, people in the U.S. and Canadians, or if I'm in Europe, but maybe I'm looking at England and France, and just really targeting down that way. And then the next one is age. And boy, this is, for my gallery, I pretty much know dead on what the age range is going to be. And for us, it's going to be basically ages 50 to 70. That's where most of my buyers are coming from, and so if I know that already, I'm going to concentrate my efforts on marketing to them. I can choose gender, and for some of you, gender is going to be a pretty important factor. If your work tends to appeal more to one or the other, you're gonna skew that way, and then you can kind of just go down, and so again, we don't want to spend too much time going into the nitty-gritty here, but I would encourage you, when we're done, to go and spend a few minutes in the Ads Manager and play around with it a little bit. Don't worry, you're not going to accidentally spend thousands of dollars by clicking the wrong button, but you can just start to get a little bit of a sense of what what the possibilities are.
That's a great quick overview. And for those of you who didn't see at the bottom, I think it defaults to $5. So you can spend $5 if you want to and just try something out, but Google is your best friend when it comes to learning how to use the Facebook, and you can just Google things.
That's
like...
kind of ironic, isn't it, that Google would be your best friend to spend money on Facebook?
Well, to learn how, because you can put in phrases like how to use the AdWords, or how to build a custom audience in Facebook, and quite often the top responses will be from the Facebook help, which I will give them credit for many times, like using Google, for instance, trying to figure out, go to read Google's instructions on how to use Google Analytics, and it's painful. It's not easy. But Facebook has managed to get this, both how it's done and the instructions, pretty clear for the average person. You won't feel like you're trying to do algebra in Chinese in order to learn how to do some advertising on Facebook. So you'd have to spend some time, but this is time well spent. Even if you go out and hire, take a course from one of the gurus, if you just need some hand holding, there's people out there, Amy Porterfield and some others that will help you.
John Loomer is one that I followed.
Yeah, John Loomer. I think he's a little more advanced. I don't think he really starts. It seems like if you're going to go to John Loomer, Loomer, he sort of expects that you've already been spending, that you've already paid the Facebook stupidity tax, and he wants to leverage you up a little higher. But I've had somebody else in my Art Marketing Mastery course that took the Amy Porterfield course and said, I think it's a couple $100 for that. She said it was pretty good, but it was overwhelming a little bit, and it wasn't about artists. Well, you're not going to find one for artists out there, at least not yet that I'm aware of.
We're working on it, right, Barney?
Yeah, stay tuned. But anyway, there you can find gurus, but I'm not sure you necessarily need to. If you want to do it yourself and use Google, you will find plenty of how-to articles, free stuff. There's a tremendous amount of really good free stuff. I would make sure that I look at the dates on it so that you're not reading a post from 2012, because Facebook changes all the time. I wouldn't be looking at anything beyond early last year at the latest going back in terms of information, because it's still on Google. It doesn't mean it's up to date. So if you're going that way. But the bottom line is you can learn how to use Facebook advertising. Just jump into the ads manager. There's all kinds of further levels like Power Editor and all kinds of other things that you may never need to use in order to become proficient at using Facebook to do something. For me, I want to get post engagement, and in some cases I want to drive people to a specific page because I want them to possibly think about getting into a free course that might lead them to say, I really like that information. I'd be willing to spend a little more money to buy the full-length course. So that is a very typical way of how Facebook works. So let me give you some really useful, valuable information that's free, but there's more, and for that information that you're going to pay for something for that. And artists aren't going to use that particularly. You're going to use it to find people who are interested in your art and interested in your message. Like you were saying with those guides, Jason, I think if you can find ways to do things like, well, I just did a contest the other day. Facebook, you can go to apps, I think it's apps.facebook.com, and get the Facebook contest program, and it's free. And so you want to give away a print, you want to give away an original, there's all kinds of different things. There's ways that you can engage your potential buyers by using contests and other things. There are programs like shortstack.com and pagemodo.com, M-O-D-O, shortstack like the pancakes, and you can go there, and both of them have really cool free stuff. Of course, they want to sell you the premium stuff, but they'll give you cool ways to engage your audience on Facebook with contests and other things, ideas for tabs and so forth. So if you get the idea that Jason and I are pumped up about Facebook and think there's prospects for us and for you, you'd be right. I don't see anything that's any better. Not discounting things like Pinterest. I believe Pinterest has some real potential for artists. I just haven't had a chance to wrap my arms around it. I don't think you have yet either. Am I correct, Jason?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, one thing at a time, one battle at a time.
Yeah, if this works well, maybe 6 months or a year from now, we'll be on here talking about how Pinterest is coming along. And Pinterest is just in the formative stages of putting together a monetization program where you can promote posts or promote pins, as they call it there. And I believe there's money just because of the visual nature of it and the type of audience they have for artists to do something with Pinterest. But it's going to take some studying to figure that out. And right now, to me, Facebook is path of least resistance to a way. If you're going to pay to play online, I don't believe there's another better way than Facebook at this point to
Well,
do
and
it.
I agree, and I think that one of the big factors is just simply the user base. Not everyone is on Facebook, but pretty close. Billions of users, and not only billions of users, but very actively engaged users who are on Facebook frequently. And so when you just start thinking about the number of potential users that you can reach. And then, as we've been talking about, the ability to kind of narrow in and pick out the ones that are most effective, it can be very powerful. I do think and I think one of the big challenges that you're going to run into is that the tendency is going to be, and I hear this from a lot of artists, is that, well, yeah, I'm on Facebook and I have a bunch of followers, and they're all artists. And in fact, this is the case with our gallery Facebook page, is that we have a good number of followers there, and we do have some collectors following us there, but we also have a large, understandably, a large number of artists following the Facebook page. And so I think that it's a valid concern that, hey, I don't want to be spending money to be putting my images out in front of fellow artists. Bless their hearts and bless their souls. They're maybe give me great feedback, and maybe even an artist will buy a piece of my art from time to time. But I want my marketing efforts to be primarily directed towards potential buyers. And so again, it comes down to targeting and thinking about some of the key factors that would get you a potential qualified buyer. And as I was talking to the Facebook marketing team, they had some suggestions that we thought would be pretty helpful, including, obviously age is going to be something, geography is going to be something, but they also said you should look for education levels. They suggested that we potentially target our advertising to people who like cultural kinds of pages. So, for example, people who like, the Phoenix Opera would be a great example. Yes, you're going to get some artsy types who are in there and like it, but you're also going to get a lot of professionals and people who participate in cultural events, and you have the ability to select, hey, I want to target this to people who have indicated that they like the Phoenix Opera, or who like the Metropolitan Museum of Art, or those kinds of things. And so again, it just gives you this ability to dive down and really narrow in on your target. And then, as Barney said, you just spend a few dollars and see how that goes and what the results are, and have the potential to see some real payback. And that's the other big advantage that we have selling art. And when I say we, I mean we as a gallery, but I also mean you as an artist. The item that ultimately you're going to be selling is a high dollar item. Whether it's a $500 painting or a $5,000 painting, or a $50,000 painting, or sculpture or photograph, you're going to have that potential to really reap the rewards after having not spent necessarily a tremendous amount of investment, unlike someone who's selling iPhone cases or this or that widget.
The advantage that the people selling iPhone cases is their audience is really broad.
That's right.
So they can, it helps them because they need a very tiny slice of that broad audience to be successful. Before I forget it, I do want to mention it. It came to mind as you were talking there that when you start doing this, definitely do testing. You will find that if you run a similar ad, maybe with a different headline or a different image, that you'll get a better response from one to the other. And if you keep doing that, so that you'll begin to get a feel for, my audience seems to respond to vertical images with red or horizontal images with blue, or they like this verbiage over that verbiage, whatever the case might be. There are going to be patterns and trends that come out of what you're doing, and you can make this pay off for yourself better by paying attention and not just running a single ad and hoping it does well. Run a couple of ads in an ad set. And again, this is getting a little technical here, but if you do some testing, if you're going to spend time on this and spend money, run some different type of ads. You'll find that some respond better than others, and obviously you want to keep going with the winners. It'll just make everything work better for you. You'll get a better response. Facebook will like the fact that these ads are working well, and they'll show them more often for you as a result. So testing helps.
Well, Barney, we should dive into some questions, and we'll mention we've got, you all may notice that we've kind of changed up the way we're doing this broadcast, and instead of holding it right on Google Hangouts page, we're holding it on our individual blogs, and there are going to be a couple of different ways that you can interact. There is the Q&A app that is built right into this video window, and if you're logged into Google, you should see a little box up in the upper right corner that says Q&A, and if you type on that, it will give you an opportunity to ask questions directly in the video. If you're watching it on my blog, we've got a live chat box about halfway down the page where you can type questions in, or you can type them into the comments. And Barney, what's the best way for people to get questions to you?
Well, either my email address, barney@barneydavey.com, or because I like to mix things up, I put a hashtag on Twitter, art2mkt, art2mkt. You can just hashtag that and put in a question there. If you're a Twitter user, and I am, and I believe Twitter can also be useful for artists, but we won't even start that conversation.
That's a conversation for another broadcast.
Yes, it sure is. So
there you go. We've got five. I count at least 5 different ways that you can ask questions this evening, and don't have a tremendous amount of time left. But if you do have questions, go ahead and hit us up through one of those methods, and let's dive in and take some questions. Did you have any up, Barney, that you wanted to start with?
I see there one from. I think it's from Tim Longwell, well, the question is, how many followers before spending? I would think more along the lines that ads will increase followers if done correctly. Follower count is not as important. Lynn, I guess, was asking, time is valuable as money. How do you evaluate the amount of money you invest in maintaining your own website versus posting on Facebook? Did I just throw 2 questions out there? Sorry about that if I did. You have the one with Lynn. Let's jump on that for the moment. Okay,
yeah. So, and that is I think that's a great question, Lynn, and I like the fact that I can tell Lynn's thinking strategically here. I have limited resources in terms of time and money. Where should I be putting those efforts? And my suggestion is, and I think that probably if you're listening to this broadcast, you've been thinking that you might want to experiment with Facebook, and I would just set a budget for yourself, both a budget of time and money, and say, well, if I'm going to be spending a couple hours a week on my online marketing, I'm going to give 50% of that or 40% or whatever it is of that time to my Facebook efforts over the next several months. And I think you do need to do it in a sustained way. Don't just do one post or just have one idea about what you might try, and if it doesn't work, give up. Experiment and try a few different things, and give yourself kind of a longer time frame to think about. Over the next several months, I'm going to try this and see what happens. And then it's also important that you're not just going into it half-cocked, so to speak, that you've got a plan in place, as we've talked about tonight, that you've got an idea of, okay, what would be engaging for someone seeing a post on Facebook, and what would get them maybe to my website or get them to join my mailing list, and be creative. I think that's the other thing that we haven't talked about, is that there are artists out there already being successful, and I'd love to hear your stories of what you've been doing that has been successful, and love to hear from any of you who after tonight go out and start trying to advertise on Facebook, what your results are and what works and what doesn't.
Here's my take on that. Your website is your pied-à-terre, your piece of the earth on the internet, and that's your most sacred place, and everything else is a feeder system to get people to your, ultimately to your website, where you can engage them and perhaps even have e-commerce and sell them something off of your website. So just think about it. If you're a store on Main Street, that's your website. That's the equivalent of your website. It's just digital. And you're advertising, whether it's in the local weekly newspaper or on Facebook, it means to get that customer aware of you and then traffic to your store or to your website. So if you keep it in that kind of a context, then it'll help you understand what you should be doing. You need to do a little bit of both. If you buy into Facebook is going to be valuable for you, you have to invest some time to learn how to use it and some money to make it happen. There was a question about how many followers should you have before you determine it's worth spending some money on advertising. I don't think you could have 2. I don't believe you need to aggregate a whole bunch of followers. That's kind of irrelevant. People aren't really looking for that so much as they're looking for useful content. If you've got something out there that's useful or interesting, people are going to want to get involved with you, regardless of whether you only got a handful or you got a few thousand. And I know Jason probably wants to jump in there or something. I'll just say this: if you're not sure what to post on Facebook, ask Google, what should I post on Facebook? You'll be amazed. There's a bunch of really great articles that will tell you, give you, here's a rotation. You do this one. You put up a quote. You put up a recipe. You put up something that happened personal in your life. Here's something about your business, and here's something about your art, and do it again. That's just off the top of my head, but there's help out there, and Google for the answers, or ask your friends. But a lot of great advice just by looking on Google.
I've got a question from Tom Byrne, and he asks, do you think a Facebook page replaces a website? And I think, Barney, you just touched on this, that really your website is the website's the main thing here, and I think I'm definitely in agreement on that, all your other efforts are driving people to that website. And so, no, I don't think Facebook replaces a website for a number of reasons. One, you don't have enough control over how your images are going to be displayed, what kind of information you can include. There's no easy way to organize your artwork on Facebook. So somebody who's interested in your sunset landscapes, Facebook's not going to be a good place for them to go and try and find that in the way that a website would be, where you have more control. So my vote is no on that one. Not a replacement, but an augmentation of your marketing efforts online.
They use the term digital sharecropping when they talk about putting all your money into social media or in any other online platform that you don't control. If you've put all your efforts into building a Facebook page and don't have that piece of the earth on the internet that's your website, you're at the whim of Facebook. They can change their terms of service. You can get your site. This happens to people. Somebody hacks their account, gets their password, and posts a bunch of junk on there, and Facebook shuts them down. They didn't do anything bad, but they're out of business. And if that's your only way of making money, or your only way of getting recognition and having a reputation on the internet is through Facebook, you're screwed. So don't let that happen. Use Facebook like I talked about. It's a feeder system. It's a way to get awareness and then drive traffic back to your website that you own and ultimately no one ever can take away from you. How much time we got for more here, Jason?
Yeah, we're running over time. I thought I've got one more question. If you've got one you want to bring up, this one comes from Norval, and Norval says, "Do you attempt to directly target people who like your competitors' pages?" And that's a great question, and the short answer is absolutely. I mean, this is something that's really interesting about Facebook, is that it gives you that opportunity. Now, you have to be a little bit careful because, again, you might have an artist who you consider to be your direct competition, and you look at their follower base, you say, well, obviously here's some people who are interested in this type of work. It makes sense for me to target them. And I think that makes perfect sense. What you do want to be a little bit careful about, though, is that you don't know, how many of that artist's followers are friends and family and fellow artists. That said, for a few dollars, it couldn't hurt to try and see what the results are, and try and get a little bit of a sense by interacting then with people that you get as followers to see if they are collectors or otherwise.
That might be one where you'd want to test that exclusively to just see if it does you any good. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with going after your competitors. That's business, you know. If there's two dry cleaners on the street, they both want the same. They're both going after the same demographics. So my opinion on that is make sure that you're better than your competitors. If you are and you're going after them, you're going to get their customers. It's that simple.
Of course, the reverse side of this that we need to be aware of is that if I can target my competitors, guess what they can do? They can target your followers just as easily. So
back to my point about being,
better. Yeah.
You have to strive for excellence in every way that you can. Especially just look at what you're doing versus what your competitors are doing. Make sure your website's up and running better than theirs, your images are better, or whatever you think your customers or potential customers are going to measure you against. Make sure that you're better than they are. You want to answer that last question by Lynn and then call it a night?
Yeah, I think. Sure, let's take it.
Okay. Which Facebook ad objective do you recommend? Boost your post, promote your post, send people to your website, increase conversions on your website?
The answer is yes.
You're going to have different objectives for what you're trying to do. Increase conversions on your website. That's where you are sending somebody to your website, and typically a conversion would be one of two things. You're asking them to buy something, or you're asking them to subscribe to something. Speaking of subscribers, you can see how you can subscribe to my email address on the below my name there. Anyway, so conversions would be one thing. If it's just boost engagement, I mentioned earlier that I just was trying to boost engagement. I just wanted people to see my post and ultimately be enticed by it and come and read my blog post, which worked. I had 2 very high traffic days as a result of spending $20 over that post. It was a popular post to begin with, but I know what really made that even more popular was the fact that it was boosted by Facebook, and I could see the traffic in my statistics that Facebook was generating a third to a half of the traffic I was getting on the website. So did it work for post engagement? Absolutely.
Barney, we've done it again. We've covered a lot of territory, and I know there are a lot of other questions that and some great questions we just haven't had time to get to. This certainly won't be the end of our conversations about Facebook and other social media, and we'll definitely get to your other questions. If you have additional questions, leave posts on our blogs, the posts related to this broadcast, and we'll attempt to reply to some of those, as many of those as we can over the next couple of days. And I would encourage you to share this post on Facebook. Appreciate it if you do, and share it on your social media. And would definitely look forward to seeing you in our next broadcast.
Sounds like a plan. As always, Jason, it's been a pleasure, and wish we had a couple more hours to go on it. I'm sure we could fill it up with more information, so we'll save it for next time. I'll just say peace out, everybody.
And have a great one. We'll see you here in a month's time. It'll be exactly a month's time, because February is one of those great months that ends on an even day. So we'll see you back here on March 10th. Have a good one, everyone.